are the lords of despair, masters of terror. Dread and agony are our meat and wine, and they are plentiful indeed. From Asdrubael Vect. The Drukhari, Eldarix Malum, or Dark Ones in the Eldari lexicon, also known to outsiders as the Dark Eldar, are a forsaken and corrupt Eldari kindred, the sadistic, malicious counterparts of the Asuriani. Like their cousins of the Craft Worlds, the Drukhari are an ancient and highly advanced alien race of fey humanoids. The alternative term, Dark Eldar or Eladrith Ineas in the Eldari tongue, was first coined by the Drukhari Archon and Supreme Overlord of Comorak, Asdrubael Vect, in the 32nd millennium. Their armies, like their Craftworld Eldari counterparts, usually have the advantages of mobility and advanced technology, though they are often lacking in resilience and numbers. They revel in piracy, enslavement, and torture, and are sadistic in the extreme. Their armies make use of various anti-gravity skimmers such as raiders and ravagers to launch high-speed attacks. They strike with little or no warning, using an interdimensional labyrinth known as the Webway to traverse the galaxy safely and far more quickly than most advanced starfaring species are able to with their warp jumps. The Drukhari are unique amongst the intelligent species of the Milky Way galaxy because they do not live on a settled world or worlds, but rather the bulk of their population is concentrated in one foul city-state, the Dark City of Comorak, that lies within the ordered Imperium of the Eldari Webway. They are mainly pirates and slavers who prey on targets across the galaxy to feed their unholy appetites for other sentient beings' souls, a terrible desire called the thirst, though they are sometimes used as mercenaries by other starfaring species. The Drukhari are the living embodiments of all that is wanton and cruel in the Eldari character, highly intelligent and devious to the point of obsession. These piratical people revel in the physical and emotional pain of others, for feeding upon the psychic residue of suffering is the only way they can stave off the slow consumption by the Chaos God Slanesh of their own souls. The Dark Eldar, particularly their warrior castes, are tall, lithe, white-skinned humanoids. Their alabaster skin is death-like in its pallor, for there is no true life-giving sun within their dark realm to provide color. Their athletic bodies are defined by whipcord muscle, shaped and enhanced until they are physically stronger on average than their Craftworld Eldari counterparts, as the Drukhari prize physical and martial prowess highly. Yet, for all their physical beauty by human standards, they are still repugnant monsters. When viewed with the witch sight of a psyker, their black souls are revealed, for they eternally thirst only for the psychic energy of the anguish and torment of other thinking beings in order to fill their own infinite emptiness. Unlike their Eldari cousins, the Drukhari do not integrate their still powerful latent psychic abilities into their culture, and indeed have a great disdain for psykers of any kind. This is because the use of psychic abilities would only further draw the attention of she who thirsts, Slaanesh upon them, and their souls are already at risk enough of being devoured by the Prince of Chaos. Spawned in the darkest pits of the universe, the piratical Eldar are a curse upon all races of the galaxy. For untold thousands of years they have preyed upon us, stealing forth from the shadows and dark places on their raids of terror and violence, massacring or capturing all whose paths they cross. That they are utterly evil and inhuman is without question. From High Lord Kuron, the Imperial Commander of Asthirax. The Drukhari are black-hearted reavers, to whom the galaxy and all of its peoples are but cattle to be enslaved at will. These alien pirates strike hard and fast from the shadows of the webway, vanishing again before the foe can fight back. They are a twisted reflection of their craft-world kin. They dwell in the strange realm known as the Webway, inhabiting Komorag, a cyclopean interdimensional metropolis rightly feared as the Dark City. They feed on negative emotion, dedicating themselves to a non-stop war with the peoples of real space, in which they strive to inflict as much pain and misery as they possibly can. Forced through a dark quirk of fate to abandon the once potent psychic abilities of their Eldari ancestors, the Drukhari instead epitomize physical excellence. Their athleticism and speed are unmatched, except perhaps by their towering arrogance. Add to this their lethal arcane science, and the Drukhari are amongst the greatest of threats in an already deadly galaxy. 10,000 Terran years ago, amid the apocalyptic screams of a newborn god, the mighty Eldari Empire fell to ruin. Yet the architects of this catastrophe were spared the worst of its wrath, hidden deep within the bounds of the Webway. They lurk there still, a race of unrepentant monsters, damned to suffer an eternal thirst for the pain of others. The Drukhari have fallen from true grace in the most profound of ways. Their roots as a culture lie at the very height of ancient Eldari society, when theirs was perhaps the most highly advanced species in the Milky Way galaxy. The Eldari once boasted mastery over an interstellar civilization that was the greatest seen in the galaxy since that of the Old Ones. The various cultures of the Eldari that exist today in the 41st millennium are only shadows of the glory of that ancient Eldari empire. The true origins of those who now call themselves the Drukhari can be found in hidden enclaves amidst the atrocity and mayhem of the terrible time of the fall of the Eldari, the great cataclysm that nearly destroyed the entire Eldari species. It was an event so terrible that not only did it kill trillions of Eldari, but it breached the dimensional barrier between real space and the warp, and gave birth to the chaos god Slaanesh. The ancient Eldari had perfected their science and technology to such an extent that they could remake planets and quench the light of the very stars at a whim. The need for labor or hard work in their society became nothing but a dim memory of a difficult past. The Eldari, arrogant in the belief that they were now the true masters of their destiny, spent more and more of their time in esoteric pursuits and entertainments intended to escape the ennui that set in over the course of their centuries-long lives of ease and comfort. Their mind and psyche is a thing of duality. It can experience zeniths of bliss and nadirs of suffering far more keenly than that of the other intelligent starfaring races of the galaxy, including mankind. They were capable of becoming just as irredeemably corrupt as they were of transcending their flaws and touching the divine. With so much power at their hands, the core worlds of their empire, once the height of civilization in the known universe, became centered solely on the pursuit of individual fulfillment and self-gratification. To understand the reasons for the fall, it is necessary to know something of the Eldari mind and soul. An Eldari's mind is incredibly complex. Their senses are extremely sharp, able to perceive incredible levels of detail. Their emotions can be so strong that a human's are merely pale shadows by comparison. They are extremely intelligent. Their thought processes are much faster than a human's. All of this means that an Eldari experiences the universe and all its sensations to a greatly heightened degree compared to a human. Similarly, an Eldari's soul is much brighter in the warp than those of what they call lesser sentients, like humans who do not possess such potent psychic abilities. The Eldari are able to affect the nether realm of the Imperium much more than most other intelligent peoples. Every Eldari is a latent psychic and has the ability to become a very powerful psyker with training. It is the psychic strength of the Eldari soul that was one of the primary causes of their downfall. Before the fall, during humanity's dark age of technology, the Eldari had an immense galaxy-spanning empire comprising thousands of worlds, and some claim that it was larger and more powerful than even the Imperium of Man at the height of its power. The Eldari lived in relative peace. Barbarian races such as the Orcs were kept at easily manageable numbers and never had the strength to threaten the might of the Eldari Empire. The humans were not yet virulently xenophobic and did not have a large interstellar domain, and the Tyranid hive fleets remained unknown. The Catan and Necrons, the ancient foes of the Eldari, had been defeated long before and still remained dormant in the midst of their great sleep. Life on the Eldari core worlds was idyllic, with fantastically sophisticated machines that took care of all the labor and manufacturing required to keep an advanced society functioning, leaving the Eldari free to indulge in other, more aesthetic pursuits. With all menial work taken care of for them, they became indolent and decadent. They began to explore more deeply the arts of pleasure, delving ever deeper into hedonism. This descent into decadence spanned Terran millennia. Tradition and order disintegrated as the Eldari pursued the limits of pleasure. Sects called pleasure cults were formed, dedicated to achieving the highest levels of hedonistic sensation. Their ceremonies and practices became ever more wild, eventually devolving to violence against one another and even the ritual sacrifice of their own kind. Some Eldari hated what their race had become and left their homeworlds for the unexplored and virgin Maiden world, or left on the newly constructed craft worlds, leaving the pleasure cults to their madness. Among the pleasure seekers and the interminably curious of the Eldari were those whose pursuit of excess became ever more extreme. These included a great proportion of the aristocracy of ancient Eldari society, who possessed the wealth and time to truly explore the meanings of decadence. One by one, the leaders of the pleasure cults that were becoming the centerpiece of Eldari society became obsessed with their own power and gratification. They relocated their headquarters to the labyrinth dimension known as the Eldari Webway, for so great was their political influence that they could command the construction of entire extra-dimensional sub-realms just for themselves. Unseen, these pleasure cult lords continued to grow in power and influence, initiating more and more of the ancient Eldari population into their strange and shadowy creed of decadence. The Eldari are the most psychically gifted of all sentient beings in the galaxy, and as the hedonistic corruption gradually seduced them, the echoes of their ecstasy and agony began to ripple through time and space. In the parallel dimension of the Imperium, the warp, the reflections of these intense experiences began to coalesce. As the shifting tides of the chaotic Empyrean can take form around the raw emotions emitted by the sentient beings of the material universe and attract even more of such similar psychic energies to themselves. The constant stream of individual selfishness and indulgence pouring into the warp from the Eldari Empire nourished and empowered that which lay within, a nascent god of pleasure and pain, content to wait and to grow. As the Eldari Empire sank into corruption, decadence, brother turned against brother in pursuit of ever more extreme and darker pleasures, some of the wiser Eldari foresaw the disaster that was approaching their society and fled from the core worlds to safety. The first of these were the Exodites, who chose to establish a network of Eldari planetary colonies known as the Maiden Worlds, far from the blighted heart of the Empire. Many of these still exist in the galaxy, their cultures living in a symbiotic relationship with the world spirits of the planets they call home and protect. Among the last Eldari to escape from the Empire's core before the fall were the ancestors of the present day's craft world Eldari. As their society collapsed into civilization-wide insanity, these Eldari recoiled in horror from what they were becoming. Realizing that they stood upon the brink of destruction, they bent their considerable resources to the construction of the massive craft worlds, the graceful, space-borne cities that were the size of small moons. These Eldari retreated into aestheticism and spiritual introspection, preserving what they could of their ancient ways and culture before the time of the pleasure cults. They left the core worlds of the Empire behind for the dubious safety of deep space, to the laughter and contempt of those who remained behind. Some even managed to flee far enough to escape the terrible destruction that was to come. Within the warp, The constant stream of indulgence and depravity pouring from the Eldari Empire became as unstoppable as a tide. It nourished and empowered that which crystallized at its center, a nascent god of excess and amoral pleasure-seeking. The long millennia of Eldari hedonism had made a massive impact in the psychic realm of chaos. Within the warp, the decadent Eldari civilization was giving shape to a new, major power of chaos, which grew and grew over thousands of Terran years, getting stronger and more defined until suddenly it sparked into a malevolent intelligence, a shatteringly huge and malign being with an immense and bottomless thirst for Eldari souls. This was the birth of the Chaos God Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Pleasure, better known as She Who Thirsts to the Eldari and all their descendants, for to them, Slaanesh was inherently female. This process of psychic gestation lasted for thousands of standard years, corresponding to the historical era that was mankind's age of technology and age of strife, although when Slaanesh finally came into being, the results within the material universe were apocalyptic and sudden. As depravity riddled every aspect of Eldari society, the pleasure cult sought ever more violent thrills. Before long, the streets of Eldari cities ran with their blood. The once elegant architecture of their palaces became battlegrounds as the Eldari preyed upon each other, reveling in the cruelest of crimes. Their insanity and tainted passions poured into the warp until it finally achieved critical mass. With an apocalyptic bellow that tore the heart out of the Eldari Empire, a new Chaos God was born, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Excess. An almighty psychic shockwave skithed across the galaxy, destroying countless billions of Eldari souls as its birth cries echoed through the material realm. The souls of almost every Eldari were stripped from them in an instant and devoured by the newborn Chaos God in a cataclysm of pain and terror. There were few survivors. Most Eldari were driven mad, their minds trapped half in the real world and half in the swirling insanity of the warp. A great warp rift was created in the material universe at the site of what had once been the center of the Eldari civilization, encompassing almost the entire Eldari Empire and creating the Eye of Terror, thus marking the end of the era known to humanity as the Age of Strife. World after Eldari world had fallen into the warp, to later be known as the Crone Worlds. Slaanesh, meanwhile, gorged itself upon their horror and despair. Unstoppable in its ascendancy, the new god consumed the ancient deities of the Empire and scattered their psychic remains to the far corners of the Imperium. The Eldari civilization was gone. All that was left of their species were the exodites of the farthest flung maiden worlds, the craft-world Eldari who had traveled far enough to escape the aftershock of destruction caused by Slaanesh's birth and the formation of the Eye of Terror, and those adherents of the pleasure cults who were hidden in the sub-realms of the Webway. Much of the Webway was shattered into ruin by the fall, but unlike the craft-world Eldari who fled the catastrophe in real space, those Eldari who had built their own jealously guarded empires in the Webway remained physically unaffected by Slaanesha's birth. The echoes of the new god's apotheosis still resounded within them, but unlike their kin in real space, they had escaped destruction. In their arrogance, they did not end their quest for excess and decadent pleasure, not even for a momentary respite following the death of their empire. Repentance and atonement were meaningless concepts for a people that no longer acknowledged any limits on their actions, regardless of the consequences. The change that was wrought upon those Eldari sealed within the webway was far more subtle. Rather than having their psychic essences, their souls consumed in one great draught by Slaanesh, their souls slowly drained away into the warp, taken over time by She Who Thirsts. The Eldari hate and fear Slaanesh above all other things, for she was given life by their actions, and yet she waits hungrily to claim each and every one of them, now or later. Where the Eldari of the Craft World learned to deny Slaanesha's hold upon them by using the mystical spirit stones, the infinity circuits, and the philosophies of the Asuryani path to safeguard their souls from consumption, the Eldari of the Webway became exceptionally good at ensuring that other beings suffered in their place. As long as they steeped themselves in the most evil and savagely decadent acts, the Eldari of the Webway found that the curse of Slaanesh upon their people could be avoided. The psychic energy generated by the suffering and agony of others nourished their diminished souls and kept them vital and strong, filling their spare frames with unnatural, robust energies. Assuming that they could feed regularly enough upon the miseries of other intelligent beings, these Eldari became psychically immune to the passage of time, earning a twisted form of immortality. And so it was that the Drukhari were born, a race of sadistic murderers and fiendish torturers who feed upon the suffering of others in order to prevent the slow death of their own immortal souls. 10,000 standard years later, in the 41st millennium of mankind, Slaanesha's thirst consumes them still. There truly is no escape, for the Drukhari have only exchanged a horrible but quick death for an eternity of infernal hunger and the infinite emptiness wrought by self-absorption and pure, amoral selfishness. Komorragh was originally the greatest of the Webway port cities, impossibly vast and able to transport a fleet to any of the most vital planets of the Eldari Empire by virtue of its many portals. Because of the access it granted to the far-flung corners of real space, this mighty metropolis was reckoned to be the most important location in the entire Webway. It was too valuable to the Eldari as a whole to belong to any single aspect of their empire, and so it existed outside the jurisdiction of the great Eldari councils of that time. Precisely because of its autonomy, the Webway city port quickly became a magnet for those that wished their deeds to remain hidden from prying eyes. The realm of Komorragh expanded unstoppably as wealth flowed across its borders. It spread outward into the void, consuming other Webway port cities, private estates, and sub-realms with each new expansion. It grew ever larger and more impressive as it fed on their plundered resources. Unseen, the dilettante lords who ruled Komorah's spires and dens of vice grew in status alongside their adoptive city, initiating more and more of the Eldari species into their shadowy creeds. Deep in the webway after the fall, the groups of pleasure cult survivors came together and laid the foundations of the vast new subrealm that they named Komorah, the Dark City, which was built on the foundation of the ancient Eldari port city within the webway of the same name that had lain outside the jurisdiction of all the Eldari authorities of their lost empire. As more and more Eldari survivors from other subrealms in the webway began to arrive, they soon added their own regions to the new realm, slowly making it even larger and more heavily populated until it became what it is today, a vast domain, an infernal city of suffering and death. To this day, the Drukhari raid and pillage the galaxy at large from their hidden subrealms in the webway, sowing as much misery and destruction as possible and stealing away millions of captive slaves to their lairs within the Dark City to be exploited for their own horrible ends. They are experts in the techniques of torture, as well as mental and physical degradation, as the longer a Drukhari can drag out the torture of a slave, the more psychic nourishment they can take from him or her. A Drukhari who has recently fed upon the suffering of others shines with a cold and startling aura of power, their physical form restored to beautiful, youthful perfection, even as their soul rots within its pristine shell. One who is not allowed to partake of such dark psychic energies for long enough will eventually become a physical shadow of their former beauty, desperately hunting for a taste of misery to stave off the gnawing thirst in the depths of their own withered soul. If a traveler were somehow to breach Komorah's ruining wards, they would first bear witness to the Dark City's tributary realms, shimmering and distorting around it. One minute, these vassal domains glimmer in the distance. The next, they loom so close that their palaces and minarets can be seen by the naked eye. To venture unheralded past these satellite realms is to invite destruction. Many large and territorial cabals of Drukhari reside within their twisted geometries, deadly pirate bands of pitiless warriors who live only to inflict pain on others and will suffer no intrusion on their realms. Worse things lurk in their crooked shadows, or swoop swiftly and silently through the air above in their never-ending hunt for prey. These are the hidden domains in which the Drukhari enact their vile rites and devilish schemes. Their origins lie in the tumultuous times that preceded the fall as the cults of excess began to thrive. Their private realms in the webway flourished unseen until the largest of their number grew powerful enough to threaten Komorah itself. How typical that the humans should rely upon crude technology to protect them. How fitting that we, the Dark Eldar, should kill them where they feel safest. From Kregeth of the Slaughtered Heart. Drukhari, like most Eldar kindreds, make use of advanced technology, including anti-gravity devices, dark matter weaponry, nanotechnology, and psychic artifacts. While they do make use of psychic devices, They do not any longer use psychic powers themselves because of the danger that interacting with the warp brings for those whose souls are desired by Slaanesh. Psykers are treated as playthings in Comorar, and given the twisted, sadistic nature of the Drukhari, this necessarily involves pain and torment for them. Though it is manufactured rather than physically grown from the hardened substance of the warp like the wraithbone implements of the craft world Eldari, the Drukhari weaponry is just as technologically advanced as that of their more benevolent counterparts. When it comes to war, the Drukhari are veritable artists. Their technology is refined to the point that some of its effects appear as nothing less than magical to less advanced intelligent species like humanity. Their infinite, if infinitely dark, imaginations and sheer skill have led them down a sinister path. Their favorite weapons can set every nerve ending afire with pain, dark light beams, whips that bleed acid, and eldritch soul traps. They are so confident of their own abilities that their lightweight suits of body armor incorporate bladed plates not only for protection, but also to provide them with yet another weapon to inflict pain. The warriors of Comorar are well versed in the physiology and anatomies of all the other starfaring species of the galaxy, knowledge that is used to inflict the maximum amount of pain, suffering, and death. They employ a number of handheld weapons designed to eviscerate, lacerate, and incise at close quarters. Although varying wildly in design and use, all employ a similar technology in their construction. They are built from very lightweight materials, with blades honed to a molecular edge capable of cutting through even ceramite armor plating when sufficient force is employed. Weapons incorporating powerful shock fields have also been recovered by Imperial forces, and these devices utilize an energy generation and transference systems as yet beyond the comprehension of human tech adepts. Over the millennia, Comorar grew from its shrouded beginnings into a galactic nightmare, its expansion driven largely by the machinations of one being, Asdrubael Vect of the Cabal of the Black Heart, who rose from slavery to become the true Supreme Overlord of the Dark City. 4,000 standard years after the fall of the Eldari, in the time that mankind calls the 35th millennium, Comorar underwent its greatest ordeal since its founding. The Dark City was to be subjected to a full-scale invasion by some of the Imperium's most elite warriors. This catastrophic battle saw the rule of the ancient Eldari noble houses of the city brought crashing down. They would be replaced by a city of Cabals under the rule of Supreme Overlord Asdrubael Vect, the architect of this time of strife. He began his days as an Eldari slave, yet through pure guile and murderous ambition, he eventually rose to become the leader of a militant organization that he named the Cabal of the Black Heart. By the time he had established this power base, he had been recognized by the Drukhari's true-born aristocracy as a genuine threat. The Cabal of the Black Heart was opposed at all turns by the most influential of High Commodor's noble houses, Zelian, Krylak, and Ilithian. So it was that Vect, ever the master of turning foe against foe to his own advantage, concocted a plan to bring the fury of the Imperium of mankind to bear against his many enemies. So audacious was this scheme that, to the eyes of most, it would have seemed like a horrific gamble. This could not have been further from the truth. Every angle had been carefully considered, every necessary loyalty bought beyond any danger of doubt. Asdrubael Vect's plan to achieve ascendancy demonstrated that his mind was like some intricate and unstoppable clockwork machine. By the time the plan had run its course, millions had been ground between its merciless gears. Vect, meanwhile, elevated himself to a position of total supremacy, borne to unimaginable heights upon an ever-growing mountain of cooling corpses. The seeds of the Imperial invasion were sown in the region of the galaxy called the Desiderian Gulf. This area of wilderness space was well known among the human starfarers of the Segmentum Tempestus for the number of spacecraft that had disappeared within its confines. General Imperial practice was to avoid it at all costs. Unknown to the Imperium, there existed a vast portal into a main arterial of the webway within Desiderian space, shielded by hollow fields that made it appear to be nothing more than a shimmer in the starlight, perhaps a result of gravitational lensing. Behind this portal lurked the pirate fleets of Commodor, waiting for unwary prey. The Drukhari's noble houses preyed upon Imperial shipping lanes only rarely in order to escape retribution. Hence, the missing ships were always considered acceptable losses, or written off as bureaucratic errors of the administratum. Vect's first move was to increase the frequency of these piratical raids tenfold. He made it his cabal's priority to capture every Imperial Navy warship and invade every human world within reach of the Desiderian portal. He tore apart the Astra Militarum regiments garrisoning the planets of the Desiderian system, devastated their fortifications, and disappeared with his living bounty into the depths of the Dark City, leaving nothing but utter ruin in his wake. This campaign saw the Cabal of the Black Heart grow rich in plunder and souls, though Vect's detractors thought him a fool for antagonizing the massive Imperial war machine. With its usual ponderous, bureaucratic slowness, the Imperium eventually reacted to the disappearances in the Desiderian Gulf. A strike cruiser belonging to the Salamander's chapter of the Adeptus Astartes was close enough to investigate. It was patrolling the edges of the Gulf in search of the sacred artifacts and relics of their Primarch Vulcan. Captain Focus of the Salamanders ordered his ship deeper into the Desiderian Gulf. After a short but violent exchange with Vect's Cabalite fleet, Focus's strike cruiser Forgehammer was crippled by haywire bombs and transported through the Desiderian portal right into the heart of the Dark City. The furor that resulted from this audacious capture set the spires of High Commodor aflame with new intrigue. A Space Marine captain was a great prize indeed, for such an individual could withstand extreme and prolonged mental and physical torture before divulging his vital secrets about Imperial defense. Before long, Vect found his Cabal's fleet in the Desiderian Gulf dwarfed by the armada of the Archon Lord Zelian. The Forge Hammer, still rendered impotent by Vect's haywire field, was confiscated by Zelian, taken to High Commodore and analyzed by a long dissection process. In his arrogance, Lord Zelian had not reckoned with the resourcefulness of the Space Marines trapped within the stricken strike cruiser. The ship's Vox communications network had been shorted out by the haywire field, but unknown to Zelian, there remained a more pervasive method of communication available to the Astartes. Captain Focus's close friend, the gifted librarian Hestion, had sent a psychic request for aid as soon as the starship's systems had been disabled. Hestion acted as a living beacon to the rest of the Salamander's chapter, a beacon now trapped within the spires of Zelian's realm in the Dark City. When Lord Zelian sent the elite of his warrior court to bring the Space Marines to his torture chambers, they were met with far sterner resistance than anticipated. The Drukhari found it easy to carve through the hull of the strike cruiser and gain entrance to its dark corridors, but overpowering the Space Marines proved impossible. Lit only by the flashes of bolt gun fire, a desperate battle took place within the hull of the Forge Hammer until Astartes and Drukhari blood had mingled upon its hull plates. Zelian was quick to realize that he had underestimated his victims. He returned the salvage rights for the Astartes' starship to the Cabal of the Black Heart, appearing generous but actually intending to seize the Space Marines once the Black Heart had suffered the losses in taking them captive. Vect readily agreed, forming small strike forces of all those warriors in his cabal whom he suspected of disloyalty, and sent them to face the strike cruiser's defenders piecemeal. Vect's Cabalite warriors, triumphant on dozens of worlds, marched into the Forge Hammer without fear, but the battle lasted for solar days. Zelian was happy to let Vect drive his so-called Cabal to destruction, believing its Draken to be a fool for not attacking with all the force at his disposal in a single massive assault. Vect played a waiting game, feeding the disloyal elements of his Cabal to the guns of the Space Marines to buy time, and even employing Comorite mercenaries with well-known ties to Zelian's court, all of whom were soon swallowed by the violence within the human strike cruiser. On the 16th solar day of the siege, the skies above High Commodore suddenly broke open. The Salamander's chapter had received the coordinates that had led them to their beleaguered battle brothers from the librarian Hestion's psychic broadcasts. The Desiderian portal had mysteriously been left fully operational, its guards slain and its controls locked so that it could not be closed. The full fury of the Imperium of Man thundered from the crackling jade-colored webway portal directly above Archon Zelian's personal spire. Through it came starships bearing the heraldry of not only the Salamanders, but also the badges of the Howling Griffons and the Silver Skulls chapters of Space Marines. 24 strike cruisers, each appearing like a chunk of Gothic architecture reshaped for war, hammered through the wide open portal into the shadowy skies of the Dark City. At their heart was the great battle barge Vulcan's Wrath, an immense spacecraft with broadside batteries that could flatten whole cities. Its prow was a vast jutting ram that ploughed straight into the spire where Xelion stood, crushing it like a hammer driven into a priceless sculpture. Meanwhile, the Drukhari overcame their surprise quickly. From nearby Port Shard came hundreds of exotic craft, each a needle-like splinter next to the slab-like Imperial vessels, but no less deadly for that. Void Raven bombers and razor-wing jet fighters careened out of their towering hangars like bats from a cave, descending in swarms to attack each Astartes strike cruiser. Though many were destroyed by the Imperial cruiser's broadsides, others systematically targeted the larger ship's guns with focused Void Lance fire and sustained hits from their disintegrator cannons. The Vulcan's Wrath was struck by thick blasts of electromagnetic force produced by Port Shard's salvage spars, rendering the majority of its weapon systems useless. One by one, the Imperial ship's guns were silenced. But these were Space Marines, and they were nothing if not resourceful. Ejecting from each strike cruiser came drop pods, fired with such force that they were projectile weapons in their own right. The drop pods hurtled down, smashing through Drukhari fighter craft and Comorite star scrapers alike, each containing a squad of Space Marines who deployed upon impact with their weapons blazing. They left pure ruin in their wake as priceless Eldari statues shattered and the spires of the Dark City fell. The Astartes' counterattack robbed the Drukhari of the initiative. Within only moments of the drop pod assault, the Space Marines had established a perimeter in the obsidian-paved streets of the Krylar Quarter. Though they took constant fire from Kabbalite warriors and scourges that flew through the dark skies above, Astartes' power armor proved to be an effective barrier to the Drukhari's splinter weaponry. And yet it was not long before more of the Dark City's denizens joined the fight, drawn to violence and death like sharks to blood. Mass swarms of skyboard-mounted Hellions and Reaver jet bikers swooped down to rake and tear at the Space Marines, who returned fire, literally, with their Promethium-fueled flamers. The half-demon mandrakes and raider transports, loaded with Drukhari warriors, assaulted the Space Marines with claws, knives, and splinter pistols. Battle was joined from one side of High Comarach to the other, and the streets seethed with violence. Entire sections of High Comarach burned as the invading Space Marines cut down or incinerated each new breed of horror that assaulted them. Word spread quickly through the Dark City of the human invasion, and high up in the arenas, the gladiators of the witch cults mobilized for war. The Space Marines within the city were 500 strong, almost half the size of a full chapter, and they maintained a defensive perimeter throughout the Krylar Quarter. High Archon Krylak himself led a mass charge against the Astartes, intending to crush the invaders that were destroying his personal fiefdom. Yet his rampage was ultimately halted by a stray blast from a dark lance that vaporized him where he stood. As the Forge Hammer lay shackled by electromagnetic force high in the spires, the battle in the skies of the Dark City intensified. Xelion's last command had been to destroy the captive human ship no matter the cost, for if mere humans recovered his prize, the Archon's authority and that of his fellow noble-born peers would be shattered forever. Flights of winged scourges armed with haywire blasters and heat lancers began to systematically destroy the captive ship, while a fleet of Ravager gunships forced the Space Marines who sought to rescue the vessel's battle brothers back into cover. Then, in a storm of light generated by their teleportation technology, Terminators from the Salamander's first company teleported directly onto the hull of the Forgehammer and returned fire. The Scourgers were driven back, and Captain Focus seized his chance. His warriors emerged from cover as a single force, sending a crack missile soaring into each of the 9 towering spars that held his craft captive with their beams of electromagnetic force. Miraculously, each missile triggered a chain reaction of explosions, and the burning spars crashed down into the streets below. The librarian Hestion summoned a psychic storm of his own, a raging inferno in the shape of a flaming drake that tore the Ravager gunships out of the sky one by one. The Forgehammer had been ravaged by the Drukhari assaults, but it was free at last from the Dark City's clutches. With a roar, the strike cruiser began to ascend into the sky and freedom. Far below, the Space Marines fighting in the Zelian Quarter were completely encircled as the full weight of Komorach was pressed against them, and warriors from dozens of Drukhari noble houses joined the defense of the city. Yet, the Space Marines' objective had been achieved, for the Forgehammer was free. A single curt comm signal was sent, and within mere moments, the main bulk of the Space Marines in the Dark City teleported away in a brief burst of light. Those that had been cut off from the main assault gave their lives to buy their brethren time, or else were paralyzed by Drukhari hypertoxins and taken away to later fight and die as warrior slaves. Confusion reigned as the haywire fields that had shackled the Imperial spacecraft were disengaged one by one. The battle barge, Vulcan's Wrath, now joined by the badly damaged Forgehammer, fired its retros and disengaged itself from the ruins of what had been Archon Zelian's pride. The vast starship's engine blast flattened spires and starscrapers alike before the Space Marines made their escape. The entire Astartes fleet then passed through the still yawning webway portal above High Komorach and escaped triumphantly into real space. In the aftermath of the Imperial invasion, Komorach changed forever. The power vacuum left by the vanquished ancient Drukhari noble houses of High Komorach was quickly filled by Asdrubael Vect and his jubilant cabal of the Black Heart, who had proven their superiority to their rivals in the crucible of war. In the years that followed, Vect played politics like a true Machiavellian master of intrigue, forever asserting the meritocracy of the cabals over the ancient aristocracy of the Eldari noble houses. Eschewing all pretense at innocence, Vect ensured that word of his machinations became public. All would know that to stand in the way of Asdrubael Vect meant certain death, and in the centuries that followed, his grasp on power would inexorably tighten. And so it was that the cabal of the Black Heart rose to ascendancy over the Dark City in place of the old Eldari nobility, and Archon Vect's new position as the Supreme Overlord of Commorragh and the Drukhari people was sealed. They are a scourge upon our galaxy, the most vile and sadistic of all our xenos foes, and a peril to any who would ply the void in search of profit or gain. Whatever happens, should the shadow of their ships darken your path, pray you die fighting at the helm of your vessel, lest fortune favors you and they take you alive. From Magos Domos Angelain, an explorator. The Calixis sector and Korunus Expanse are regions that have some significance to the Eldari, and while it has been many Terran millennia since they have been any major presence there, the worlds of that great frontier are still laced with many thousands of webway passages and tunnels connecting worlds and star systems. Today, these tunnels are twisted, stretched, and torn by the psychic pressure of the warp storms dividing the Calixis sector and Korunus Expanse. While the mysterious rites of the Harlequins long ago sealed many of these passages, others still remain open to the tides of the warp, infested with vile and ephemeral creatures. This region of damaged tunnels is centered across the warp rift known as the Screaming Vortex. The Vortex is home to teeming horde of demon worshippers and mutants, living and dying at the whims of warlords and sorcerers, intent on murder and subjugation in the name of their dark gods. While this is a ready source of slaves and victims for the raids of the region's cabals, it is a realm largely inhospitable to the Drukhari, so strong is the presence of she who thirsts within the storm. However, suspended at some point between the Screaming Vortex, the Korunus Expanse, and the Webway is an island of relative stability where numerous groups of Drukhari have formed a twisted haven. Here floats the Nexus of Shadows, a Drukhari outpost built upon an ancient and massive technological relic. 3 major cabals dwell in these tunnels and passageways. The foremost of these, at the heart of the Nexus, is the Cabal of the Splintered Talon. The others, the Cabal of the Shadowed Thorns and the Cabal of the Crimson Woe, are of a more mercenary inclination due to their lesser status, often selling their murderous skills to other races in exchange for resources or opportunities to grasp at power. The Cabal of the Crimson Woe operates in the Calixis sector more than in the Korunus Expanse, in part to avoid directly competing with the Cabal of the Shadowed Thorns and thus drawing their ire. Numerous other groups exist alongside these, from the Cult of the Withered Blade, which controls the blood-spine pits on the Nexus of Shadows, and the Sutured Helix, a coven of homunculi, to numerous smaller factions that raid and scavenge for scraps of their betters' might and prestige. The Drukhari operating near the Nexus are frequently on the move, either carried within fleets of void ships or traveling in smaller groups on light skimmers through the winding and impossible labyrinth of the Webway, returning to the Nexus of Shadows only periodically to trade their cargo of tormented victims for supplies and to replace slain warriors. These itinerant raiders often cross paths with pirates and reavers of other species, particularly the chaos-aligned flotillas that hail from the Screaming Vortex and isolated bases like Iniquity. A select few of these have been shown the location of the nexus, so that they may trade in slaves, dark lore, and abhorrent technologies, but these are relatively rare. The Drukhari are a plague upon the Korunus Expanse. Raiders, slavers, pirates, and even rogue traders suffer at their barbed lashes and blades. Any who cross the maw and sail the void of the Expanse learn to fear the wicked silhouettes of their void ships and their seemingly endless cruelty towards all life, including their own. Only vigilance and firepower keep the worst depredations of these terrible raiders at bay, though from the dens of Footfall to the commerce halls of Port Wonder, there are countless tales of crews lost and ships savage in their sudden attacks. Within the Calixis sector, the Imperial Navy keeps the warp routes and sector worlds protected against the worst of these raids, and while some outposts and lone vessels still disappear at the hands of the foul xenos, most Imperial citizens sleep soundly, never even knowing that such a depraved species haunts the stars above their heads. In the Korunus Expanse, it is different, as that lawless place has neither a fleet capable of guarding the uncharted wastes, nor a tightly controlled network of worlds that can call upon one another in times of need. The Expanse is a playground for the Drukhari, where along with a myriad of other alien menaces, they can raid worlds and take void ships with relative impunity, slipping away into the night from whence they came. The power of the Drukhari is compounded by the fact that no one knows precisely where they come from, or where they go, nor can they explain the aliens' uncanny ability to appear from nowhere and then vanish with their stolen cargoes of goods and slaves just as quickly. Some rogue traders believe there must be a Drukhari world somewhere in the Expanse from which they launch their raids, though where exactly it is and how it could have evaded detection for so long remain a mystery that has yet to be unraveled. There is no good story without a villain. I shall provide you with an antagonist beyond your imaginings, or even your comprehension, and as you die you will curse my name exquisitely. From Dracarus, master of the sutured helix. The Gaelan Sphere, upon which the Nexus of Shadows was built, is an ancient human relic of the long-forgotten Age of Technology. The size of a small moon, covered with towers and antennae, the sphere was crafted around a solid core, the remnants of some mineral-rich asteroid that its automated systems are slowly eroding away as it adds more and more levels to the sphere. Neither the Gaelan Sphere's alien inhabitants nor those few explorers from the Imperium who have had a chance to study it know its true purpose. How the sphere came to enter the webway is also a mystery. Abandoned for untold ages, the sphere could have drifted through a webway gate or even been drawn towards one by the ancient programs and protocols of its cogitators seeking to study a breach in the webway that is perceived as a celestial phenomenon. Alternatively, It is possible that some unknown force moved it into the webway for some inscrutable purpose. Once it entered the webway, the sphere spent eons drifting from one region to another before becoming trapped in a confluence of ancient forces and alien power fields. Now, it floats in a relatively stable position, more debris of a forgotten age of enlightenment. It was Salaine Morn and her cabal of the Shadowed Thorns that first rediscovered the Galen sphere and decided to put it to use. After being exiled from Komorrah, the Archon spent many Terran years wandering the webway with her fleet, raiding worlds and looking for a place to claim as her own. The sphere, with its well-hidden location and ancient technology, presented the perfect place for a new home. Unfortunately for Salaine, the sphere's defenses and legions of servitor guardians were too numerous and powerful for her cabal alone to overcome. Thus, she forged an alliance with Zergan Kul and his cabal of the Splintered Talon, and together they purged the city of its ancient human defenses, destroying that which they could not control and sealing away the areas that they could not inhabit. Even though their forces had secured a landing zone and deactivated the aging orbital defenses, it was to take Terran years for the Drukhari to carve out the areas where they would build their city. As more Drukhari came to the Nexus, new sections would be cleared of their ancient automated defenses. Often, they would drive thousands of slaves into an area to identify these dangers, or simply to exhaust the turret's ammunition so it could be destroyed. Other xenos races were also allowed to settle in the Nexus as part of trading missions, though these aliens had to clear their own areas for habitation. The lasting result of this wanton conquest by the Drukhari and their allies is that many areas of the Nexus still show signs of battle, and the stripped remains of the combat machinery of the sphere is a common sight along its shadowed streets. Occasionally, the Nexus's old defenders rear their heads once again, but the Drukhari usually put them down swiftly. Almost immediately after the arrival of them and its establishment as a port, the Nexus began to operate as a hub for trade and a base for raiding. Close to the Korunus Expanse and the Calixis sector, it opened up fresh opportunities for slavers and worlds that before had been out of reach or too dangerous to raid, using the fractured remains of the webway. The Nexus of Shadows quickly grew in size and wealth on the backs of its slaves, despite the fact that most Drukhari of Komorrah at least openly shunned the cursed place and the outcasts who lived there. The xenos of the Korunus Expanse and the heretics of the Screaming Vortex have no such compunctions, however, and have found the Nexus to be a useful place to trade and congregate, a place far from the reach of the Imperium and utterly hostile to its agents. Salaine welcomed such factions into her city on account of the wealth and influence they offered, as well as the added protection it afforded her against those who would try and take the city from her. Unfortunately for Salaine, it was not an outside force or an alien that was to oust her from power. In the end, one of her own, Zergan Kul, usurped her and exiled her once more into the webway before she could do the same to him. For many of the inhabitants of the Nexus, this change in power meant little, especially for the slaves, to whom one Drukhari Archon is much the same as another. Salaine Morn intentionally projects a presence that is both evasive and unmistakable. Her dread majesty is as hard to put into words as it is to ignore, appearing at once menacing and tempting. The Archon catches many of her foes off guard, uncertain of the obfuscated nature of this ancient being. Morn is several thousand Terran years old, though only she knows for certain how long she has been alive, and has seen and done much that would long haunt the nightmares of lesser beings. Like all Drukhari Archons, she is possessed of a deadly martial prowess, but her true weapon is a mind finely honed by the lethal intrigues of Komorah's high society. She finds it utterly distasteful then that she and all those she commands are exiled from the Dark City and now even the Nexus of Shadows. At her grudging command, the warriors of her cabal have turned to mercenary work, selling their efforts to lesser beings as part of a plan to regain the power she once possessed. On the rarest of occasions, she deigns to speak to these prey creatures herself. The history of the Drukhari is one of unrelenting horror. Much of it is hidden in shadow, recorded only in allegory and fable by those intelligent races whose worlds they have ravaged. Records are kept, however, tomes scribed in still living flesh using bladed quills of bone. These histories divide the tale of Komorah into 3 ages, ill-defined and overlapping though they are, each more redolent with cruelty and evil than the last. I will now go over the Drukhari history in chronological order, or at least the one we know. It starts with the age of Dark Genesis, and the port of Komorah in circa M18, the 18th millennium. Komorah establishes itself as the primary nodal port of the Eldari webway, growing larger with every passing Terran decade, built entirely within a labyrinth dimension and hence outside the jurisdiction of the existing Eldari councils. Komorah acts as a magnet for those who wish to avoid attention. Then the Twilight cults in circa M18 to M20. Those leading the new Eldari paradigm of total self-indulgence rise in status and power until they can secede entirely from the physical plane. They take up permanent residence in the webway, from which they can plumb the depths of decadence undisturbed by Puritans and what they call weaklings. Over time, their sovereign estates grow into entire subrealms, many of which are powered by the energy of stolen suns. The solar systems and their inhabitants plunge into darkness by the Eldari's star theft, wither and die in the freezing cold of the void. But the Eldar don't care. The Ailing Pantheon, from circa M19 to M24. The worship of the traditional Eldari gods begins to wane as new sects and societies rise to power. The Dark Muses, many of whom are synonymous with sensual vice and sin, become the unofficial figureheads of the new order. Darkness Rising, from circa M25 to M30. The depravity of the Eldari race plumbs terrible new depths. Cults of pleasure and pain flourish in the hidden reaches of the webway, and even the core worlds of the Eldari society become obsessed with ever greater acts of excess. As the lines blur between sensation-seeking and outright evil, a new force stirs in the warp. Exodus, from circa M30 till M31. Sensing the end, portions of the Eldari people combine and modify their void ships into craft worlds, gigantic living vessels able to accommodate an entire planet's population. One by one, they begin to escape the corruption that plagues their empire. Hundreds of craft worlds sail into the Sea of Stars in search of the relative safety of the untraveled void. The fall of the Eldari, from circa M30 to M31. A new chaos god is born, collapsing the entire Eldari Empire. Slanesh, the Dark Prince whose birth screams tear out the heart of the Empire and leave pure chaos in its place. The shockwave of the new god's apotheosis plunges a vast section of real space into the warp, creating the Eye of Terror. Most of the Eldari craft worlds are destroyed in the psychic backlash. Only the Exodites, the Eldari of the farthest flung craft worlds, and those hidden in the sub-realms of the Webway, survive. Their species is shattered forever in a single apocalyptic instant. Komorah Ascendant, from circa M31 to M32. In the wake of the fall, the unrepentant Eldari hidden within the Webway consolidate their power. The next millennium sees the port cities and sovereign realms of the labyrinth dimension grow steadily in size and influence, and Komorah becomes a sprawling realm unto itself. The Dark City thrives under the oppressive rule of the noble houses that lurk at its heart, known to the other Eldari survivors of the fall as the Dark Ones or Drukhari. Now we come to the rise of Vect, beginning with A Legacy Begins, from circa M32. A half-born Drukhari slave, known only as Vect, vows that he shall rule the Dark City even if it takes an eternity to do so. Vect founds the Cult of the Black Heart, the first organization to openly refer to themselves as Eladrith Ineas, or Dark Eldar. The 13 foundations of vengeance are laid down at this time, an intricate code of dishonor destined to spread through the society of the Dark City in the centuries to come. The impact of Vect's rise to power will resonate through Komorah's history for millennia to come. The War of the Sun and the Moon, from circa M33. The solar cults that control the Dark City's stolen suns rise in power and influence, ultimately declaring war upon the Drukhari noble houses that would see Komorah plunge into permanent night. An aerial war rages for centuries, but ultimately the noble houses emerge victorious. Vect's Cult of the Black Heart transforms to become the first Drukhari Cabal during this troubled time, and is instrumental in the final defeat of the solar cults during the Battle of the Seven Shrouds. Vect Ascendant, in circa M35. Asdrubael Vect launches a series of punishing raids against the Imperium's shipping lanes in the Desiderian Gulf. True to his plans, this triggers a punishing counterattack from 3 chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. Vect manipulates the invasion to cripple the power bases of the Patrician Archons, and in the aftermath takes their place as ruler of High Komorah. Shortly after, the Desiderian portal into the Webway is forcibly collapsed, triggering a massive implosion and annihilating Imperial naval elements mustering for a second attack. The Cabal's Ascendant, from circa M35 to M36. The ancient Eldari aristocracy of Komorach is in disgrace. It is soon replaced by the Kabbalite system, as pioneered by Vect and his cabal of the Black Heart. Privilege and status are supplanted by sheer ambition and murderous capability. Many elder Drukhari noble houses reinvent themselves as cabals, though they never forgive Vect for usurping their power. And the breaching. In circa M37, Vect causes the hidden portals that link each Drukhari satellite realm and port city of the Webway to be revealed, forcing them open and building the Great Gates, huge edifices that are permanently guarded by Vect's elite incubi and Kabbalite warrior garrisons. Over several millennia of civil war and violent strife, Korunus expands into these once autonomous regions of the Webway until they become integral to the Dark City. Only the realm of Shah Dom remains autonomous. Now we come to the Second Age, the Age of Pain. Starting with the Ghost Planet in 156 M35. The far-flung hive world of Auxilion stubbornly maintains radio silence after its unsanctioned decision to hire Eldar mercenaries. Though after one diplomatic gaffe too many, the alliance turns sour. Led by the homunculus Cresthekia, a carnival of pain descends upon the planet. 5 years later, a large-scale Imperial delegation is sent to investigate the lack of forthcoming typhs. When they make planetfall, they find no trace of human life signs whatsoever. The entire planet, every hive, haplock, and spire is completely deserted. The battle for the Thaxar Rift in 745 M35. The Severed begin to plunder the region of space known as the Thaxar Rift. They find their effort hindered by chaos-worshipping renegades who have a substantial presence in the region. Rather than face the renegades directly, Arconariensis ensures that his foes come to the attention of the Imperial Navy and Adeptus Astartes, and a grinding war ensues. The Severed haunt the edges of this conflict, tales of murderous ghosts and xenos pirates spreading like wildfire in their wake, while they test and study the Imperium's way of war. Eventually, the Imperium's forces are reduced to a shadow of their former might. They are forced to resort to selective exterminatus to annihilate what remains of their traitor foes. While the doomed worlds still smolder, the Severed descend in full force. They annihilate the surviving Imperial Navy warships left behind to watch over Thaxari space before proceeding to plunder and pillage at will. Vect's Gift in 677 M36. Asdrubael Vect tricks his would-be rival Archon Kellythresh into opening a casket that has ostensibly been presented as a tithe. Held precariously in the collapsing field of the casket is the unstable essence of a black hole. Kellythresh's entire realm is plunged into a howling, yawning vortex. The Black Conquest of Yelindra in 724 M36. Yelindra of the Blackened Tear uses her preeminent grasp of the arts of Shaimesh to poison an entire Imperial hive world. even as the populace of Tybor III are withering into desiccated husks, Ylindra is granted a boon by Asdrubael Vect. She chooses to take a spire of her own in High Comorar, founding the witch cult of Lahmaya and training an army of deadly courtesan warriors to further her deadly works. The Plague of Glass. In 926 M36, the noted Comorite artisan Jalaxlar is feted for his incredibly lifelike black glass statues of Dark Eldar. His rivals soon discover that he is using an isolated viral helix to create his masterpieces from living victims. In the fight to control this deadly virus, it is accidentally released, running rampant through several districts of the Dark City. This plague of glass is eventually contained and weaponized by the Hex, whose homunculi are intrigued by its artistic possibilities. The slow death of Gregus in 345 M37. The cabal of the Poisoned Tongue comes into conflict with a fleet of orc freebooters stationed out of Gregus. Lady Aurelia Marlis is incensed that mere barbarian pirates should deny her will. Personally capturing a muscle-bound orc knob, Marlis instructs her Lahmayan poisoners to prepare a surprise for the greenskins upon Gregus. Lady Marlis's cabal makes planetfall weeks later, fighting their way into the center of the orc capital city and impaling their barely living captive upon a half-built gargant before melting away into the night. The corpse begins to shed millions of spores into the air, each of which bears a cargo of terrible wasting toxins. As the infected spores corrupt the orcoid reproduction cycle, the population of Gregus grows weaker and weaker. When Marlis returns, it is a simple matter to slaughter the survivors. The First War in the Webway in 579 M37. A coven of 1,000 Sun sorcerers from the kindled Spirit's Thrall Band conducts a great ritual in the Webway, hoping to gain access to the scream-filled city of Comorar, the home of the Drukhari. Before their ritual is complete, hundreds of Drukhari led by troops of Harlequins pour from an invisible portal and launch themselves at the Rubricae, defending the coven. With their spells sundered, the kindled spirits counterattack, their blasts of warp flame eventually breaching the fabric of the webway itself. As the arterial walls of the webway buckle and collapse outwards, the backlash strands the combatants in a shattered pocket reality with no way out. There are whispers that the fighting has continued ever since, and that each warrior is fated to die and be reborn in an endless cycle for the rest of time. The Tower of Flesh in 796 M37. The homunculi stronghold known as the Tower of Flesh is created, a living, breathing fortress made of the bodies of those who defy the homunculi coven of the 13 Scars. The renegade space marine Fabius Bile is tutored in the dark arts within its blood-slicked halls. Bile is accompanied to the Dark City by Lucius the Eternal, who is declared by his hosts, the witch cult of the Wrath Unbound, to be endlessly entertaining, both on and off the arena floor. The Blade of Vect in 984 M37. The subrealm of Shah Dom grows steadily in influence and power until Archon Eluriak, the self-proclaimed Emperor of Shardom, declares himself more worthy of rule than Asdrubael Vect. Vect publicly vows that all of Shardom will feel the edge of his blade, much to the amusement of Eluriak's famously well-funded and elite forces. 3 solar days later, a warp rift opens suddenly above the satellite realms, and a burning Imperial Navy battleship thunders downward, plunging deep into the hidden city's heart before its warp drive detonates. The palace fortress of Eluriak is torn apart. The warp rift allows demons to invade the city, and in a matter of a single solar week, the devil-haunted realm of Shardom is reduced to cinders. Vect is reported to have allowed himself a rare smile at the moment of its fall. The last act of Lord Korunus in 182 M38. Inquisitor Lord Korunus of the Ordo Xenos second guesses the Dark Eldar raid upon the Imperial industrial world of Demoine. The moment the Cabal of Immortality denied blink into existence above Demoine's capital, they are all but annihilated in a thunderous firestorm. Korunus' absence is keenly felt at the post-action debrief, however, and the Inquisitor Lord's underground fortress complex is investigated. His remains are found, spread thinly upon every page of every occult tome in his library. The Warg Zoggit in 227 M38. The Orc warlord Zoggit, famous for killing anyone foolish enough to imply he might be a bit of a weird boy, declares a warg straight into the Vermilion space rift encroaching upon the world of Zogdis. He and his boys emerge in the Comorite port spar of black blood, much to the surprise of its resident cabal. The resultant storm of violence carries hundreds of thousands of orcs into the twisting byways of Comorar. War is joined in earnest when the Dark City turns its attention to the Orcoid invasion, systematically isolating each orc army in order to destroy it piece by piece. However, each cabal is preoccupied by trying to turn the unexpected invasion to its advantage, that the orcs cause far more damage than any of the cabals thought possible. Several districts of Comorar are toppled or burned to cinders by wave upon wave of howling orcs. Eventually, the orcs are corralled, and over 10,000 greenskins are captured by the witch districts, packed to capacity for almost an entire fortnight. Beauty relinquished. In 717 M38, a new fashion sweeps the spires of Comorar, and soon every member of the noble houses has paid to have himself horribly disfigured. The suddenly fashionable homunculi consider it to be a very good year, but the trend is predictably short-lived. The time of reparations proves even better for business, and suspicions abound. Pandaemon betrayed. In 799 M38, the trans-dimensional satellite realm of Pandaemon declares independence from Comorar, instantly triggering a great war between Archon Q, Lord of the Iron Thorns, and the Cabal of the Black Heart. Q is ready for Vect's attack, but not for the treason of his own daughter, who reveals herself as one of Vect's many courtesans. Civil war rages for solar weeks, but ultimately the realm of Pandaemon is delivered into Vect's hands. A gruesome lesson in 933 M38. During the prolonged campaign for Massgrave, the 121st Cadian elite, famed across the Ultima Segmentum as the Eldar Killers, disappear completely without so much as a comm signal. Weeks later, thousands of headless and armless human bodies with Imperial Eagle tattoos are found roaming aimlessly along the arched streets of Komarach's Vault District, moaning, staggering, and bumping into each other before being put out of their misery by Hellion hunter gangs. Desperation's End in 272 M39. The Imperial frontier planet of Desperation unwittingly sows the seeds of its own demise when it sends an astropathic message detailing an invasion of Hellspawn. In fact, Desperation has been chosen as the theater for the latest unveilings of the Children of Bone, a clique of homunculi who specialize in unusually large grotesques. After the desolation of the planet's cities, the homunculi disappear with holo captures of their vile creations at work. Years later, the rescue void ships that enter Desperation's orbit determine the natives of the planet to be heretical beyond recovery, for they now worship the Children of Bone instead of the Emperor. The natives fight with frenzied tenacity, for they fear the homunculi far more than the Imperium's troops, but nonetheless the world is completely purged within the space of a solar week. The Thieves of the Ice Mists in 616 M39. Upon the ice-locked planet of Fenris, aspiring space wolves recruits begin to disappear during their trial of Morkai. Each aspirant has been implanted with the gene seed of Lehman Russ, and only the strongest have iron will enough to prevent it from ravaging their bodies and affect permanent development into beasthood. The wolf priests notice that an unprecedented number of these aspirants are going missing, and after fruitlessly patrolling the wilderness of Asaheim, focus their scrutiny on near space. Sure enough, a Dark Eldar fleet is stationed above the ice caps of the neighboring planet of Midgarden. The Space Wolves mount a lightning invasion upon the Midgarden ice caps, their thunderhawks descending on tongues of flame to bring the last remaining xenos there to battle. They fight with the fury of the storm, but soon enough, the homunculi Coven's garrison there fade away into the mists, their mocking and distant laughter receding into nothing. The Space Wolves find a series of white-capped chambers leading deep down into the planet's crust. Each is empty of life. Empty, that is, save for witless brutes of bulging muscle and fur incarcerated in tubular pods, some of whom resemble the Primarch Russ himself. The Space Wolves do not speak of this day. The Dark Within the Light in 117 M40. The veiled crypto-scientist Vorsh perfects a technique he calls photonic transubstantiation, transforming himself into a living beam of light and traveling distances purely in order to proclaim his genius. He is eventually captured in a prism trap by the Cabal of the Black Sun, who use his technologies to stage large-scale terror attacks upon the peace-loving Naiad Republic. The Hunters hunted in 835 M40. Duke Sliskus is hunted by the Grovian Fiends, an elite reptilian bounty hunter cadre who have a reputation of completely annihilating their targets. Sliskus instructs his agents upon the Grovian flagship Last Chance to place a device of the Duke's own invention into the metal belly of the craft. Just as Sliskus is about to pass through an ancient webway portal, it seems that the game is up. The Last Chance emerges from a gas cloud in hot pursuit, guns blazing, and follows it into the webway. The Duke's ship emerges above the home world of the Grovians, primes and ready for planetfall. The flagship Last Chance, its navigational coordinates corrupted by the device placed amidship, emerges into the blazing heart of Grovia's sun. A gauntlet thrown in 226 M41. Lilith Hesperax issues a challenge to the Dark City. Should anyone produce an inhabitant of real space that can pose her a genuine challenge in the arena, that individual will be honored beyond their wildest dreams by Hesperax herself. The competition sparked by this challenge is immediate, violent, and widespread. Archons lead raiding parties to strike at the length and breadth of the material realm, returning with ever mightier champions and deadlier monsters trammeled in their holds. Yet Hesperax defeats every victim brought before her, carving down hissing tyrannid hive tyrants, chopper-wielding orc war bosses, and righteously indignant space marine heroes with equal ease. Archon Kargiel, the Bleak Soul Brethren, finally presents Hesperax with a foe that can answer her challenge. In an especially daring and costly raid, he has kidnapped Brother Captain Cadulon of the Iron Knight Space Marine chapter. Known as the Saint of Blades, Cadulon is an exceptionally talented swordsman who has twice been declared victor at the ritual Feast of Blades. As Hesperax meets his eye across the arena floor, she knows she faces a worthy foe. With a predatory grin, the Belladonna of the Dark City goes to work, her blades ringing against Cadulon's sword in a blizzard of sparks to the maddened roar of the crowd. The duel lasts for over 6 solar hours before Cadulon finally falls, leaving Hesperax victorious with but a single bloody cut across her midriff. Amid the sudden hush, Archon Kargiel descends to the arena floor to accept his reward. Yet his look of triumph curdles as Lilith kicks the fallen Space Marine's blade across the floor to land at the Archon's feet, explaining that the greatest honor she can bestow is the deadly kiss of her knives. To the amusement of the crowd, Kargiel is lucky to last 6 solar minutes. The Coup Demons in 248 M41. The vainglorious Archon Isklith of the Cabal of the Talon Cyrix, the last descendant of a pure-blooded lineage that had lasted for thousands of standard years, briddles against the tyrannical dictates of Asdrubael Vect and his forbiddance of old empire knowledge. Deciphering the archaic rites inscribed upon the crypts below his palace, he learns how to contact demons of the warp and bind them to his will. Though his plan takes almost a century to come to fruition, Ysclith stages his coup against Vect with shocking and unstoppable force. Under the soaring skycraft of his cabal comes a ravening demonic host that drives all life before it. Before the Horde can wreak too much damage, Vect activates an ancient failsafe and completely seals off the spur of Talon Cyrix from the rest of Comorar. It is not long before Archon Ysclith finds out that his control over his demonic allies is not as complete as he imagines. Trapped with only the demon legions for company, Ysclith and his cabal are slowly torn apart. The Reaving of Garmos in 312 M41. The Garmos sisters plunge into a war between the Imperium and the Orcs of Warg, Death Smasher. Throughout the conflict, the Coven of the Dark Creed and the Cabal of the Bladed Lotus lead raiding parties to prey on both sides. They subtly tip the balance of power back and forth, extending the war far past its natural duration, and reaping the harvest of fear and misery that results. The Dancing Dead in 327 M41. The insane Archon Thindrak of the Last Hatred launches a raid on the Imperial hive world of Tamantra's Folly. During fierce fighting between her Kabbalite forces and the Talan 8th Infantry, Archon Thindrak abducts the planet's tyrannical governor and his entire sadistic household. Within the cycle, the luckless abductees have been fitted with neural restraints, dressed in improbable and torturous finery, and installed in life support tubes built into the ceiling of Archon Thindrak's grand ballroom. Trapped in an agonizing half-life, the Imperial nobles can be lowered down to the Archon's dance floor at will on wheezing brass armatures, their mere presence leaving the hall awash with an aura of pain and misery that the Comorites find most refreshing. Needless to say, Thindrak's new toys are something of a coup, her guests delighting in dancing and frolicking with the whimpering humans amid the mocking laughter of their peers. The Raven's Prey in 394 M41. The Cabal of the Obsidian Rose suffer an unacceptable defeat when they are overwhelmed by the armored might of the Cadian 346th Regiment, the Ironheads, on the mining planet of Greystar. Determined to save face, Archon Chromis orders divisionary tactics against key points all across the planet. While battle rages, a single squadron of Void Raven bombers, crafted by Chromis herself for just such an occasion, swoops undetected into the primary spoiled shaft of the Northern Polar Mines. Hurtling through narrowing tunnels and jinking between slab-sided industrial machinery, the Void Raven's superior systems see them reach the deepest extent of the mine workings. Here, dangerously close to Greystar's molten heart, they deploy a trio of masterwork void mines that trigger an apocalyptic chain reaction. Even as the Void Ravens hurtle to safety, the Obsidian Rose retreat to the webway, laden with slaves and plunder. In their wake, Grey Star tears itself to pieces, billions dying along with their planet in order to satisfy Chromisa's need for revenge. The Plague of Becoming. In 399 M41. A narcissist without equal, Archon Vane Kayarg of the Black Myriad releases the doppelganger virus on the planet of Phlogiston 6. This transmorphic plague rewrites the biology of every living creature on the planet, forcing their features to reform in the likeness of their alien conqueror. Steelfang in 421 M41. A nameless messenger butchers the inner council of Craftworld Lugganath, smashing apart a statue of Cain and using the shards as deadly weapons. Fleeing into the webway with a holo capture of her murderous deed, the young warrior calling herself Steelfang is welcomed by the witch cult of the Dark City. She soon founds her own cult, and her teachings in the art of improvised weaponry spread throughout the arenas of Comorar. Fear the Shadows in 462 M41. The Cabal of the Black Heart strike at the hive world of Lapidus, but are hurled back in disarray by the intervention of titans from the Legio Castigatum. Mere solar days later, Princeps Gendath, the author of Castigatum's victory, is murdered on his own bridge. He is hacked to shreds within his amniotic tank by hissing horrors that slither into being amid the thrashing soup. The murky shapes disappear as suddenly as they struck, leaving only a half-frozen mulch of blood and shattered armor glass in their wake. Just beyond the door, in 346, 497 M41. It is on this exact date that word reaches Asdrubael Vect of a disturbance at Cain's Gate. Something has begun to pound slowly, rhythmically, impossibly on the other side. Vect stations 500 incubi to watch over the gate chamber as a delaying measure. He pays exorbitant sums to ensure their discretion, while simultaneously ensuring all those incubi hired hail from brotherhoods who have defied or hindered his machinations in the past. As further insurance, he deploys several of his more esoteric arcane weapons within the chamber itself. Ingenious failsafes that include temporal flux mines, the seventh shard, and a tri-prismic dimensional mirror keyed to hurl anything reflected in its surface into the heart of a sun. The Veiled War in 518 M41. The witch cult of the Red Grief engages the warriors of Craftworld Saim Han in battle over a broken alliance. The war is fought at breakneck speeds through the cloud archipelagos of the planet Stratos, where visibility is almost zero, and the smallest misstep threatens a deadly plunge into the void ocean far below. The warring Eldar factions are eventually forced to disengage by the onset of a vast superstorm, leaving scores unsettled and bad blood festering between them. Begins a series of raids on the planet Chogros, capturing the Ogrin natives for the arenas. When Astra Militarum regiments arrive to intervene, the conflict escalates into a planet-wide engagement. Though they fight hard, the men of the Imperium are eventually defeated. The Crucible is strong for many nights to come as the captured Imperial Guardsmen are forced to fight the very Ogryns that they were sent to save. The enemy beyond, in 601 M41. The Incubi standing guard over Kane's Gate report new and disturbing developments to Asdrubael Vect. In accompaniment to the slow, relentless pounding, the gate has begun to vibrate at the microscopic level. Worse, those who stand too close to the portal report hearing whispered voices. Though he shows no outward sign of concern, Vect continues to lay new plans. The Shadow Hunt in 626 M41. The cabal of the Baleful Gaze and witch cult of the Wrath Unbound cripple the infrastructure of the Imperial Industrial World of Durondas II using sustained haywire bombing. The cult then lands great packs of hunting beasts, chimerae and clawed fiends, the beasts loping through the darkened streets and tearing the planet's defenders to shreds. Buried in darkness, weapons fried, and transportation crippled by the haywire bombs, the terrified Astra Militarum and their civilian charges are forced to fall back time and again. The hunted survivors are finally herded together in the Grand Templum district of Durondas' capital city. Here, the Dark Eldar Beastmasters loose their feral pets en masse, beginning a horrifying massacre that takes several long and bloody solar days to conclude, and from which no human emerges alive. The Panacea Wars in 824 M41. Vect sets his Archons a seemingly impossible task: poison the Imperium of Man and bring proof of the deed. Lady Malice proves equal to the task. Through the Harlequins, she has learned that the tech priests of Verdigris IX have recovered an STC codenamed the Panacea, a miracle cure that could save billions of human lives. Using hit-and-run raids, Malice's cabal of the Poison Tongue lure the might of an Orc warg down upon the heavily defended Forge World. The Orc fleet literally plows headlong into Verdigris IX, one massive void ship after another slamming into the world's surface to cause untold destruction. As wave upon wave of Orcs disembark from their wrecked spacecraft, the planet's surviving defenders find themselves embroiled in a desperate war for survival. Malice and her cabal swoop into the midst of the resultant havoc, cutting down anyone who stands between them and their prize. After prying the Panacea template from the gnarled fingers of the Orc Big Mech who had stolen it before her, she returns to the Dark City, leaving Verdigris IX to burn in her wake. Asdrubael Vect is reportedly impressed with this audacious raid, even as she is setting the Imperium's miracle cure atop a pedestal in her personal trophy hall. She receives an invitation from Vect to dine with him by way of congratulations. The nobility resurgent in 842 M41. Descendants of the Eldar noble houses deposed during Vect's ascension, Archons Zelian, Krylak, and Ilithian attempt a coup. They successfully resurrect the ancient Archon Eluriak, once Emperor of Shardom, and the last individual to present a genuine challenge to Vect's supremacy. However, their schemes go horribly awry, leading the Dark City into a period of strife unlike any it has seen for thousands of Terran years. As a result of their actions, a mighty demonic disjunction shakes Commodore to its very foundations, and forces Asdrubael Vect himself to take drastic action lest his city slip into oblivion altogether. The Vandred Atrocity in 864 M41. Archon Thisk leads his cabal of the Bloody Storm against Vandred, a feudal world from which the Angel's Sanguine Space Marine chapter recruits new aspirants. Sure enough, a strike force of Angels Sanguine makes planetfall within solar days, yet they are playing into the Archon's hands. Thisk releases a blood plague acquired at great cost from the homunculi coven of the Altered, a virus that taps directly into the tragic gene curse of Sanguinius' sons. Aware of their madness, but unable to stop themselves, the Angels Sanguine butcher and devour those they come to save before falling upon each other, while the Dark Eldar drink in the agony, terror, and despair. The Long Midnight in 891 M41. The last hatred ravages the Imperial Highworld Persia in a 6-cycle-long siege, using arcane technologies to bring pitch darkness to its principal hives and sending mandrakes and urguls into its confines. Many hive workers go mad with terror, but are taken back to Commodore nonetheless. It is claimed that during this siege, Caradruag, the Decapitator, selects an unprecedented 7 worthy skulls for his macabre lair. And the War of Dark Revelations in 990 M41. Tau forces defending Vigos against the onrushing might of Hive Fleet Kraken make the fatal decision to ally themselves with Urien Rakath. Despite initial victories alongside their twisted allies, they soon become alarmed by Rakath's demands that they engage in ever more costly cultural exchanges. They finally resolve to strike back when he transforms Tau warriors into monstrous grotesques and begins demanding a tribute of their sacred ethereals. The Tau muster their reserves from the world of Rubicon, yet when their blow falls, they find Rakath's fleet already gone, leaving only holograms and sensor ghosts in its wake. Panicked distress calls begin to issue from the defenses Rubicon mere solar hours later. These garbled reports tell of twisted, pale-fleshed invaders calling themselves the Prophets of Flesh. Yet it is far too late for the woefully outmaneuvered Tau forces to respond, and they can only listen in anguish to the death cries of their world. Explain your meaning, slave, and in plainer words, my translator unit has clearly fouled on your primitive tongue as it continues to incessantly repeat some nonsense phrase about a fair fight, whatever that might be intended to mean. From Archon Morigis to a defiant captive. The raiding parties of the Drukhari are able to suppress their treacherous natures only in pursuit of power, spoils, and slaves. When the cabals of Commodore gather in large numbers, they darken the skies of unsuspecting worlds with their razor-edged anti-gravity craft and fall upon the unwary populations of the galaxy with extraordinary speed and their characteristic sadism. Every Drukhari is fundamentally defined by his or her innate selfishness. Personal power, the pursuit of comfort, and the gratification of their dark desires are the only things which truly hold value for them. They take no pride in the achievements of others within their species, and measure every endeavor's worth in how it contributes to their own self-interest. The need for survival in a hostile galaxy is the only thing that bonds them together as a species, and thus, even in combat, they are not normally inclined to cooperate with one another beyond the bare minimum required. Yet, on occasion, an opportunity may present itself that even the greatest of the Archons is forced to admit cannot be seized by a single cabal acting alone. This could be an Imperial hive world whose teeming masses of humanity are ready to be culled, an Asuriani craft world drifting unpowered and vulnerable to a slave raid, or a newly discovered intelligent alien species unaware of the dangers which haunt the galaxy. Such targets represent more than a single witch cult or cabal could hope to assault on its own without suffering crippling losses. But the potential rewards are so great that they prove willing to share the spoils with others within the Dark City. Drukhari society is splintered and lacking in any true unity. The Raiders of the Dark City owe their first allegiance to themselves, and then to the cabal or witch cult to which they belong. Each of these factions constantly compete with one another in the pursuit of their divergent goals and will happily betray or murder any of its allies of convenience once they have outlived their usefulness. Amongst the Drukhari, only the most devious and ruthless survive for long, and any alliance or coalition that forms does so only either out of greed or fear of its individual participants' rivals. The lure of thousands of souls to be enslaved and tortured, and immense amounts of wealth to be plundered, can draw them together to face a large or very well defended target. Power is the only truly palpable currency within Comorar, and a successful attack on a target of unusual magnitude can secure extraordinary wealth and authority for those who were daring enough to carry it off. At the same time, no self-respecting Archon or succubus would willingly stand by while his or her rivals benefit from such a cooperative venture. As such, when large-scale assaults are in the offing, they can grow to unusually large proportions as jealous Drukhari nobles pledge their support for the raid, whilst all the time plotting ways to double-cross their newfound allies and seize all the plunder and prestige for themselves. While it is greed that forges these massive Drukhari assaults, it is fear that keeps them cooperative. The Drukhari are defined by their fear of many things, including death, loss of status, and the plots of their rivals. An unusually large war fleet allows the Drukhari to hunt much larger and more powerful victims. However, just as a raid that earns victory returns with great wealth and the envy of all Comorar, a failed raid will lead to a loss of standing amongst the participants and possible enslavement by their rivals, who will immediately move to capitalize upon the raid leader's perceived weakness. By involving all of one's rivals in the attack, the risk of failure can be shared by all. Additionally, the nature of Komorar's vicious politics means that when a Drukhari faction seeks to move against its rivals, the blow needs to be decisive, overwhelming, and completely successful. Any less will result in the unleashing of civil strife that will see entire cabals and witch cults destroyed, thousands murdered amongst the spires of the Dark City, and slavery and torture for almost all as the enemies of both sides seize their own advantage. Because of these terrible risks, the fear of these consequences keeps most of the double-dealing and treachery within a large war fleet to a minimum, until the participants return with their spoils to Komorar, of course. Every weapon your prey wields can be turned against them, given sufficient application of wit. From Archon Drakarth Zuskul. The strike forces of the Drukhari, despite consisting of treacherous and scheming murderers, work like well-tuned machines upon the battlefield. Raids are planned in meticulous detail by the Archons and Succubi that lead them, and hidden routes through the webway are opened in readiness for the assault. Only the most capable are recruited for each real space raid, which is why Drukhari warriors are such determined opponents, and why their bitter rivalries are set aside during battle. Working in concert ensures that not only is the greatest amount of punishment inflicted upon real space, but also that the maximum number of victims can be taken back to Komorar. Vendettas are revisited only once the captives are divided, for above all, the Dark City requires a steady intake of fresh souls. The Cabals regularly launch piratical invasions, so there is much to be gained from being part of such an organization. The thrill of hunting lesser mortals, the chance to personally capture new slaves, but most importantly, the revitalizing feast of unbridled destruction at a hunt's end. Upon the Cabal's return to Komorar, thousands of captives will be traded as currency, put to work in hellish depths of the weapon shops, rendered down in flesh-throughs, or tormented unto death, their demise drawn out so that their captors can gain the greatest amount of sustenance from their misery. Though many raiding forces coalesce around the warriors of a particular cabal, the Drukhari armies that fall upon real space are far from uniformly Cabalite in their composition. The witch cults who entertain Komorite society with their nightly displays of ultra-violence are powerful military organizations in their own right. Many Archons will insist upon recruiting bands of witches from the cult they patronize, or such warrior acrobats make deadly shock troops. Similarly, the vile homunculus covens that lurk in the bowels of Komorar have standing armies of their own. These shambling hordes of flesh-twisted nightmares are often purchased to bulk out a raid with frightening and resilient warriors, or else accompany their leering creators as bodyguards and assistants both. Typical raiding parties will have their ranks swelled further by hirelings or opportunists from the many mercenary subcultures that exist within Komorar. Whooping gangs of hellions and hurtling reaver jetbikes perform high-speed flyby strikes. Jagged supersonic aircraft and flocks of murderous scourges supply the Cabalites with air cover, while hovering Ravager gunships pick off armored targets with contemptuous ease. Incubi, mandrakes, grotesques, and other freakish specialists lend a raiding party strength and versatility, and it is common for a powerful Archon to surround himself with as many such varied warriors as they can. The process of recruiting such multifaceted raiding parties is known in the Dark City as Kulthrael Aht Inris Klav, or tailoring the toxin to the blade, and is intended to ensure a raiding party can swiftly and decisively overcome any opposition, no matter its nature or strengths. Sometimes a powerful witch cult will organize its own raid, marshalling whole fleets of raiders and venoms to bear its bands of gladiatrixes into battle. Such raids will often be executed with a specific acquisition in mind, be it deadly new beasts for the arenas or esoteric living ingredients to render down into the potent cocktails of combat drugs that witch cults favor. A raiding force of witches prefers close assault over all other forms of warfare, and will often be supported by beastmasters, reavers, and other such warriors of the arenas. Some of them, most notably the Pain Eternal, are as active in raiding real space as the most warlike of the cabals, channeling their fearsome resources into proving their skills in battle against the varied foes of the galaxy at large. Similarly, the covens of the homunculi will sometimes launch raids of their own volition, though usually content to squat like bloated spiders amid their webs of shadow and pain. They need a steady flow of victims as much as any other part of Comorite society. Many of the more discerning homunculi prefer to orchestrate raids of their own, picking out those they wish captured with a discerning eye, or savoring the act of indulging their own peculiar tastes with the relish of a connoisseur. A homunculi coven at war is a terrifying sight, a rampaging tide of warped bone and bulging, veined muscle that glitters with a myriad of blades and needles. Grotesques thunder into the enemy ranks alongside buzzing, clicking engines of pain, while the gruesome weapons of the homunculi torment, rupture, and liquefy the foe in spectacular fashion. Drukhari raiding forces never attack the foe directly, but use their speed, mobility, and the advantage of surprise to attack swiftly and then withdraw, with the intent of slowly bleeding the foe dry. As a result of this tactical doctrine, their forces never gather in a single place that would leave them open to an enemy counterattack. This also allows them to attack the foe where he is weakest. During large battles, they favor a style of combat that might be considered a wave attack. The Drukhari in large war fleets assaulting well-defended targets organize themselves into successive waves made up of units with differing tactical capabilities and destroy the enemy in a series of separate but linked sequential assaults. Each wave will target a specific type of enemy unit or will pursue a specific tactical objective, which weakens the foe's defenses just in time to face the next Drukhari assault wave. After several such assaults, the enemy force's defenses are stripped away until only the weakest units are left to be ripped apart in the final assault. As a result, the Drukhari refer to this combat doctrine as the flaying. By attacking the most dangerous enemy units with the lightning-fast assault that only they are capable of, the Drukhari are able to create the opportunity for their other units to move into position and attack the survivors. The faster vanguard waves buy the time needed for the slower units of a Drukhari raiding force to outflank the enemy and deliver the coup de grace. Here is an example of how this could play out. Starting off with the first wave, what they call the Splinter Raid. Striking without warning, a Splinter Raid comprised of a single Archon and his bodyguard of Kabbalite Trueborns on a Raider, 2 Reaver jetbike squads and 3 other squads of Raiders attack the foe from out of the sky after emerging from a webway portal, destroying and pinning those enemy troops that present the gravest threat. Then, the second wave, the Strike from the Shadows. In the second wave, 2 squads of Scourges drop out of the sky and use their dark lances to target the vulnerable rear armor of enemy armored vehicles, while 2 squads of Mandrakes appear from the shadows themselves to assault enemy infantry unexpectedly who are taking cover from the Scourges. Then, the third wave, the mounted cabals and cults. A much larger wave of swift-moving Dark Eldar troops comprising an Archon and his bodyguard of Kabbalite Trueborns on a Raider, 2 squads of Raiders, a squad of Hellions, a Ravager, and an entire witch cult transported by a Raider swoop in to engage the survivors of the earlier wave's attacks, and in particular, this wave targets enemy command units. And then, the final wave, the fourth one, the Cabals and Cults on foot. By the time the fourth wave of the flaying breaks upon the foe, the slowest elements of the Dark Eldar war fleet have had time to join the attack, and this wave includes 2 squads of Kabbalite warriors, 2 squads of witches, and a pack of warp beasts led by a Beastmaster. This wave moves in for the kill on the ground and catches the enemy defenders between their own advance and the Dark Eldar elements already engaged from the sky, crushing the enemy in a classic hammer and anvil movement. Once the defenders are defeated, the torture and culling of the population into hideous enslavement will begin. Fiercely intelligent and devious to a fault, Drukhari revel in pain, feeding upon the suffering and anguish of others. In them, the boundless and brilliant potential of their kind is given terrible purpose, and because their lives span to run millennia, they have all the time they need to perfect their Stygian arts. These black-hearted pirates are the dark mirror of their craft world kin, for whom they know nothing but contempt. Indeed, the Drukhari see themselves as the true inheritors of the ancient Eldari Empire, and look down upon everyone else as cowards or dim-witted prey. Meanwhile, to the Asuryani Eldari of the craft worlds, the Komorites are a reviled reminder of a shameful past they would rather escape. the walkers of what they know as the path of damnation. This state of mutual antipathy is near constant, set aside only occasionally in the fact of a sufficiently deadly mutual foe. The warriors of the Drukhari are tall and lithe, without exception. Their alabaster skin is corpse-like in its pallor, for there is no true sunlight within their shadowy realm. The Drukhari prize martial prowess above all other fields of achievement, excepting perhaps duplicity. Their athletic physiques are lined with whipcord muscle, honed and enhanced until they are superior even to those of their craft-world cousins. They stride through the fires of battle with the surety and poise of demigods, but their magnificence is only skin deep. Viewed with the witch sight of a psyker, they are repugnant monsters. The flesh of their soul selves is gnarled and cadaverous, while their eyes glow with an icy and maleficent hatred for all living things. The Drukhari quickly learn to fight with every weapon at their disposal, and to kill without mercy or hesitation. To do any less would lead them to a swift death, for amongst the entire Drukhari people, there is not a single shred of compassion or mercy. Such traits are worthless upon the night-black streets of Comorar, and are best discarded in favor of a surfeit of cruelty, arrogance, and merciless ambition. Little distinction is drawn between the sexes, for an individual's skill and intellect are far more important than traits such as raw strength or gender. Drukhari's senses are keen to the point of paranoia, their shadowed eyes and tapered ears alert to the slightest disturbance. It is said they can see in complete darkness, that they can taste fear upon the air, and that they can hear the beat of a terrified heart through a solid bulkhead door. All of them exhibit a predatory instinct that is otherworldly in its intensity, and utterly necessary to their continued survival. In the dark city, the incautious soon fall prey to their lethal peers. Countless generations of physical conflict have ensured that the Drukhari are natural, even instinctive warriors. This natural talent magnified by their cruelty. However, the innate psychic abilities of their forebears have atrophied. To channel the energies of chaos within Comorar would be to invite disaster, for such psychic pyrotechnics could draw the gaze of she who thirsts, the nemesis of the entire Eldari race. As such, the use of psychic powers is one of the few things forbidden within the Dark City. This is not to say, of course, that it has never been attempted. Rather, the punishments for those caught dabbling with the powers of the warp are so incredibly gruesome and drawn out that few indeed dare take the risk. Fewer still survive to make a second attempt. In matters of war, the Drukhari are artisans supreme, their technology refined to such a point that it may as well be magical. Their endless imagination and skill has led them down a sinister path. Their favorite tools of war include splinter weapons that can set every nerve aflame with pain, beams of dark light, whips that bleed acidic ichor, and eldritch soul traps. They are so focused on the agony of others that their lightweight bodysuits incorporate bladed plates not only for protection, but also to give them yet another weapon to use upon their prey. Collectively, the warriors of Commodore know all the ways there are to kill the other denizens of the galaxy, and delight in perfecting as many as they can. Though they turned their backs upon the material dimension long ago, when the Drukhari emerge from their twilight realm, they revel in their ability to outclass their enemies. They rarely sully their tongues with the grunting languages of the lesser races, using translator technology on the occasions that communication is unavoidable. The warrior cabals strike swiftly and without warning from portals opened within the labyrinth dimension of the webway, only to disappear like ghosts when enemy resistance becomes too severe. Their piratical raids attack from above, whole armies screaming into the midst of the foe aboard a baroque gravecraft, before leaping down to experience the slaughter firsthand. Sprays of arterial blood and explosively dismembered corpses mark their passage. The laughter of these merciless warriors, the last thing their victims will hear. To the Drukhari, the sweet fruit of horror is as pleasing as the caress of a razored blade across soft flesh. They relish breaking the bodies of their captives, but prize even more highly the crushing of their spirit, for nothing is more gratifying to a Drukhari than securing utter dominion over one who has resisted them. They drink in every nuance of woe until their captives gibber and plead for death, a mercy they are famously slow to grant. Even this is not a release for some, for the foul Drukhari homunculi hold the power of life and death in their claws. Many captives, when too broken to provide further sport, will be rent and reshaped into undying trophies or even grotesque items of jewelry or furniture. More than one homunculi's lair has sported a moaning, twitching throne fashioned from the remains of his favorite victims. Other unfortunates are rendered down, their final fate to be imbibed as an elixir or narcotic by the monstrous beings who stole their lives. The strike forces of the Drukhari, despite their own treacherous natures, are well-honed machines in combat. Raids are planned meticulously by the archons and succubi that lead them, and hidden routes through the webway are opened in readiness for the attack. Only the most capable Drukhari warriors are recruited for each incursion into real space, for to fail in such an invasion is to bring one's own entire cabal that much closer to annihilation in the Byzantine politics of Commodore. Working together ensures that not only is the greatest amount of suffering inflicted upon the forces of real space, but also that the greatest number of victims can be taken back to the Dark City. Personal vendettas are engaged once more only after all of the captives have been divided, for over all other things, the Drukhari must have fresh souls to keep themselves from the clutches of she who thirsts. The cabals regularly launch fresh piratical raids into real space, and there is much to be gained for an individual Drukhari for being part of such an effort. The thrill of hunting the lesser mortals of the universe, the chance to personally capture new slaves, which adds to their personal wealth, and the joy of unbridled destruction for its own sake. Over time, the Drukhari begin to suffer more and more from the thirst. They develop an all-consuming, ever-increasing need to drink the psychic emanations of anguish and horror emitted by the souls of other beings. It is postulated that the cause of this is the Chaos God Slaanesh, the great enemy of the Eldari, who leeches the soul essence of the Drukhari while they still live because of their pursuit of the hedonistic and sadistic activities that strengthen the power of the Dark Prince. Drukhari drink the dark emotions released by the souls of other sentient beings to stave off this leeching, perhaps by sating the thirst of Slaanesh, or perhaps by replenishing the essence of their own souls with that of the consumed one. Slaanesh will also consume the souls of Drukhari whole, should they die. They are long-lived, but not immortal. Drinking souls has a rejuvenating effect that reverses aging. Thus, they need not fear falling into the clutches of Slaanesh due to the death from old age, if they have a constant supply of souls, of course. The usual source of these souls are those of the many captives taken as slaves during their raids. Naturally born Drukhari are rare, due to the long gestation period of the Eldari infant. The ones that are naturally birthed from their mother's wombs, known as trueborns, are often very privileged in their society because of the circumstances of their birth, and many are the descendants of the ancient Drukhari noble families. As such, they are arrogant and see themselves as far better than the majority of their kind, who are born in amniotic gestation tubes and whom the trueborn call the half-born. Due to the constant and high death among Drukhari as a result of their vicious and amoral culture, creating new Drukhari using in vitro fertilization is necessary to maintain Komarah's large population. Most half-borns serve as slaves and manual laborers unless they can find another way to climb the Dark City's strict societal hierarchy. Due to this prejudice, the trueborn often gather only in squads of other trueborn within the cabals and serve as the elite Kabbalite warriors that escort their cabal's Archon into battle and serves as his most elite unit of warriors. Trueborns usually sport many more advanced weapons than their fellow warriors, such as the Shard Carbine, a Drukhari weapon design that hybridizes the Splinter Rifle and the Splinter Cannon and possesses a shorter range than either. Trueborn also often make use of Dark Lancers and Splinter Cannons, as well as blasters and shredders. The Trueborn Kabbalite warriors are an elite group that excludes any half-born Drukhari birthed in an amniotic tube from their company. Led by an officer called a Draken, these hardened killers carry a wide assortment of expensive and deadly weapons wherever they go, supposedly to better protect the life of their Archon, but in truth only to better inflict more pain and death. Trueborn delight in dramatic displays of firepower, sending powerful fusillades into the enemy's ranks, leaving bodies and the broken carcasses of armored vehicles in their wake. As far as the Drukhari are concerned, the Eldari gods died in the fall, and they despised them for it. That the gods had become so weak that they could be consumed by the ascendancy of Slaanesh indicates that they never deserved to exist in the first place. The exceptions are Kayla Mencha Kane, the Eldari god of war, still held in high regard in Comarach, and the lesser powers known as the Dark Muses, who are the embodiments of selfish vice and whose clandestine worship by the pleasure cults contributed to the demise of the Eldari gods. The Dark Muses are truly powerful Drukhari from ages past who have essentially become folkloric figures of reverence, much like the imperial cult saints. Many epitomize a particular form of vice, whose worship and practice weaken the Eldari gods and so help to bring about the fall. Favored by assassins and murderers is the Dark Muse Shaimesh, the Lord of Poisons, the treacherous brother of Saim-Han, the Cosmic Serpent. The courtesan elite of the cult of Lahmea pay homage to Lihlitu, the consort of the Void, whereas powerful Archons are more likely to follow the tenets of Vileth, a being synonymous with the immense arrogance so often displayed by their kind. Before they enter combat, many traditionalist witch cults invoke the Red Crone Hecate, or make sacrifices to Cruelest, Mistress of Blades. It is believed by many Drukhari that their current Supreme Overlord, Asdrubael Vect of the Cabal of the Black Heart, may one day join the ranks of the Dark Muses, though given his ability to cheat death again and again, this may be an honor long in the coming. I will now go into a bit more detail, starting off with Shaimesh, the Lord of Poisons. The Lord of Poisons is the treacherous brother of Saim-Han, the Cosmic Serpent, for whom the craft world Saim-Han was named. Shaimesh is the patron of all Drukhari assassins and murderers. The homunculi covens of Comarach consider themselves the practitioners of the black arts of Shaimesh. Then Lihlitu, the consort of the Void. The consort of the Void's worshippers comprise a mysterious sisterhood who are desired by powerful Archons to serve as courtesans in their courts. These Lahmaeans are renowned in Comarach for being both imaginative lovers and exceptional poisoners. They descend from the cult of Lahmea, whose courtesan elite also worship Lihlitu and gain their knowledge of poisons from Shaimesh. Then Vileth. Vileth is a being synonymous with the immense arrogance so often displayed by the Drukhari, and is particularly popular as an ideal to which many Drukhari Archons aspire. The Scions of Vileth, also known as the best aerial hunters of the Drukhari, piloting aircraft such as razor-wing jet fighters and Void Raven bombers. These Drukhari pilots will sometimes form mercenary aerial squadrons that will work for Cabal's witch cults and the homunculi of the Dark City. Then Hecate, the Red Crone. Many traditionalist witch cults always invoke the favor of this legendary witch before they enter any battle. Then Kale, the Mistress of Blades. Traditionalist witch cults also often seek the ritual favor of the Mistress of Blades, with a sacrifice for good fortune before combat. And Yeneth. Yeneth is known to be a dark muse, particularly revered by the Cabal of the Onyx Scar. It searches for her ashes in the warp rift known as the Screaming Vortex in the Segmentum Obscurus, where they are rumored to be held in a chalice on the pirate-held world of Sackgrave.